how much does your release point affect pitches you can / should throw? So very simply, the first thing that comes to my head is like if we look at, every particular arm angle where it's like straight over the top, high 3/4, low 3/4, sidearm, and sub. In just, again, simplistic terms, if you think about the spin of the ball and how to influence the most optimal spin, and then how to influence the most optimal pitch out of that as well, out of that arm slot, you think about like over the top, okay, this guy's going to probably have a better opportunity to backspin the ball, 6-12 spin, and get up in the zone right, or maybe down in the zone, looks like a ball comes up. And then the same thing with like the curveball, right? You're trying to create, if you just think about numbers on a clock, that's probably going to be the most simplistic way to think about this understanding, right? So if you think about a guy over the top, although this couldn't be done, and throwing a 2-seam, the way that the ball spins out of that arm slot, it's not going to be really a 2-seam because you're not creating that, laminar effect. The air isn't influencing the ball to move through that tunnel and through that time. So then you look at like the high 3/4, low 3/4 guy, and the way that they influence the ball to spin is probably going to look more so like, 2-seam, because that ball is coming out like this with this big circle here on top, which is going to then influence this drop. Same thing with like a changeup. Talked about this earlier with like a Luis Castillo, how it's just going to naturally come off into this movement here, and it's going to influence that ball to spin like a changeup, even like the changeup 2-seam dynamic. And then the same thing with like the slider, even though a guy up here can throw a slider as well. I don't think the slider really depends too much on the arm angle, but it's probably just going to be easier to feel that, whereas a 3/4 guy throwing a 12-6 curveball is going to be very difficult. Like Roy Halladay was like the last guy that I was like, how does he do that? Whereas you're going to try to have to manipulate this wrist posture if you're like way out here, right? Like Scherzer does that pretty well too. He's probably low 3/4 and finds a way, even though his arm slot is down here, to manipulate his wrist to then get on top and pull down a seam on that curveball to get that hump. And then, I can't really speak too much. I don't want to speak too much for sub guys, but the way that they're going to throw the ball is obviously going to be on top. The ball's going to be top spinning, so they're going to get a ton of this here, whereas you watched that Rogers coming out of the Giants bullpen and throwing that rising slider. I'm surprised that hasn't been more of a pitch for a lot of sub guys, because if you think about the way that the ball is cutting through the air from this release point, and if it's bullet spinning, right, and it's not getting the drop, think about like if you shoot a gun, the bullet spins like this, that's going to not make the ball move essentially, but you create a little bit of side spin and a little bit of backspin, it's going to go this way in the trajectory of the release. So that's a great pitch. But yeah, I think in terms of the development of all of that, we have to look at what is the most athletic, powerful arm action for the given individual. And I've talked a lot about that in the past, about how to identify that, and then you work on, okay, well, once we find that, now we start working on pitches. It kills me to see like a lot of kids in high school that like say they have, a very efficient arm action, powerful arm action from like right here maybe, right? If they were like a shortstop, they throw it across the diamond, it's boom, right here, like stay there, okay? But then they go into their mound work, their pitching position, and they think about being a pitcher, and then say like he really wants, like a 12-6 curveball. So instead of here, it's like here, and they're trying to do all these things up here, or even over here, and they're not consistent with that most repeatable, efficient arm action because of their desire to have certain pitches that they're probably not going to be able to have in a given arm action, right? So buy into your arm action, buy into the pitches that best, accompany that arm action, and then be consistent. So that's all I got for today. I need a drink of water. See you guys.